Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight we are going to be talking about the power of the mind, the heart, the spirit, and the soul. Is the human just dragging everybody along in this little red wagon and saying, you've got to come, or I'm telling you to go? Perhaps society is saying, this is the way it is. This is what you have to do. And you know, as I've always shared on the radio show, we were born, we were like an avatar. We got a Rolodex, we downloaded it, and all of the stories of my ancestral past, all of the stories of where people wanted us to be, and how we were going to perform in this world just seemed to be downloaded in an instant. Are we robots of our life? Are we out there just to be able to follow? And almost like an octopus, you put your leg out and you kind of suck it away and you're drawn into a certain area. Perhaps, as I've shared on the radio show, probably for over 12 years now, I said I really felt like I've been an amoeba. It has no way to go. It meanders. It just kind of shows up, has nothing to take, nothing to give. It just is. And isn't that the core where we're coming to? Where we will be no longer like pulled along with the old chains of the past stories, the past history, who we are, what our legacy is all about, and be able to say, who am I today, and live in the moment. My guest today is Dr. Friedemann-Schaub. His book is The Empowerment Solution, 6 Keys to Unlocking Your Full Potential with the Subconscious Mind. Dr. Friedemann, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me on your show.
I'm so glad to have you. You know, Dr. Friedemann, don't you think we need to get rid of this little red wagon that we've been carrying around all of our stuff in?
Well, for sure, absolutely. And I like what you said about being sucked into expectations and how we're supposed to be versus just being ourselves. That's definitely one of the ways to being empowered. And I think a lot of us are struggling with that notion.
You know, but if you look at it, we're in the year 2023. You know, you and I are older. I'm almost 70. We were all given a book in the 50s and 60s when we grew up. This is the way life is. This is how it plays out. Just follow the steps. Yet now in this decade, we are expected to, quote, know who I am, let go of my inner self, be able to be empowered and be able to, everything will be good. Well, you know what? We missed something in between. We missed the bridge. How do we know what's going on? How can we be trained and guided to know where we should be guided to? And how can we say, oh, is that where humanity is going? Don't you think that's the emphasis of your book, The Bridge?
Well, very much so. You beautifully phrased that. The thing is that I feel it's not only, the generations of us or our fathers and mothers, it's much more even now in the younger generation that this bridge is missing, that there is so much external focus, that there is so much distraction on this is what we are supposed to be and this is what life is supposed to be. And I talk about survival modes. And even though some of those survival modes may not even feel like, oh, I'm not in a survival mode, but in the end, they are survival modes because they are based on the idea that we either have to play it safe, That means we have to try to fit in. We have to try to be relevant. We have to try to meet other people's expectations so that we don't get rejected or criticized. Or we have to make ourselves small, invisible, make ourselves somehow just so that we are not getting into harm's way. And the problem living in these modes are that we don't ask ourselves, what's really important to me? Who am I? What do I really want? What is my purpose? And it starts already in school. I see this now even more intensely than when I grew up. Kids have so much external pressure and expectation to perform and to be someone and go to these, fancy colleges. So you need to already, go to extracurricular activities, be busy, function. There is no boredom. There is no space. There is no freedom. And there is no individuality. We are all somehow little soldiers that are just trying to make it through and hopefully get a little bit of love and acceptance. But ultimately, we end up being very disconnected from ourselves. And that is, for me, the root cause of so much of this anxiety epidemic that is going on.
Dr. Friedemann, it's interesting. My granddaughter had said to me, so we're going to make, do crafts. They always know me as the craft grandmother because I'm always bringing bags of stuff, little pieces of this, that, and the other to see what we can make. And one day my granddaughter said to me, why are we making it? We can just buy it. And I'm going, because we're going to have fun. We're just going to use our brain. We're going to be creative. And then they can't hold enough time or space. And you know what I wrote in your book? I wrote, survival is sustaining your existence. And I think that's very important because many people believe that to be surviving, it really is holding you in a space and time with a tribe because people want to be seen, heard, cared for, and loved. And all of those things, if you look at those 4 words, they expect all of that to come from an external source.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. And, this is based on, of course, early years where we did completely depend on this external source. We needed parents and a loving family to feed us and protect us. And then eventually we are supposed to learn to be self-reliant, self-responsible, be able to navigate in our own in our own truth. But those learnings are no longer really in the forefront of how we are growing up, and especially the generation now, how they are growing up. Those rite of passages where it really is about what do I really want in life and how can I discover what's inside of me. Those things are skipped. And unfortunately, and I'm not saying that this is the fault of the younger generation. I'm just saying that this is something that we have to be very mindful about, is eventually exactly what you said. It is this feeling of comfort in instant gratification. I buy it. I don't want to do it. I feel not great. So I just going to basically bypass this pain through distraction, through drugs, through weed, whatever, and never really learn to grow from it. Never really learn to hold the discomfort as a gift and not as something to run away from. And so that's where we lose this belief in ourselves, lose the understanding that we are creator beings and that we do have an immortal source or soul inside of us that can always give us answers and direction. All those things don't really come to the forefront of our minds anymore because we're not really challenged or we're not challenging ourselves to go there.
You know, a lot of our listeners are also elders, and, you know, if you look back on history, they grew up not receiving any of those, you know, love, caring, and all that other stuff. Now they're in their older years, and they're saying, oh, I finally got my kids to pay attention. I finally have someone that will take care of me. I finally have somebody that will listen to me, you know. And then they say, oof, but now you want me to let that go, and I need to be able to find it for myself? People are saying, this is like, I feel like I'm in a black hole. I'm just getting spun out like the washing machine. Don't you think if you've been on this earth a little bit longer, you can see the changes in human nature and in the way we are existing over your decades?
I think if you pay attention, you certainly can. But I don't totally agree with that they need to give up on giving or getting attention or getting, appreciation or support. Not at all. But I think there is also something in the older generation that I feel it's a generation that didn't really pay attention to their own feelings very much, because there was not really this permission even to have those, sensitive sides of them come out. That says, boys needed to toughen up, girls needed to, be good and smile. I mean, you were very quickly called overly sensitive or having anxiety or having strong feelings and you're hysteric or there's something wrong with you. So I'm just saying, pay also attention to that, what you have believed may be something that's a weakness or a flaw or wrong with you, and embrace it as a gift and not as a shortcoming.
I can tell you over the decades, is that this show, most of the guests have been over the age of 65 because they started to find their voice, so to speak. And because they said, we were always told, and I was too, shut up, don't talk, just do. This is what you're supposed to be. And I think a lot of times, even if we look at it at the pandemic, a lot of people said, I'm just not doing that job anymore. I'm not going to be put in that position of being denigrated or being hurt or being just like beaten up and, run through the mill kind of, so to speak, at work. I'm just not going to do it anymore. And they say people are struggling to find employees now. And I'm like, maybe people are just shifting around the earth and just finding these different places, and they are getting the message of what you're saying about paying attention, opening up awareness of who they are and what they're about. So there are people that are doing that. It's just looking different to many people, don't you think?
I agree, and I do also find that the epidemic was for many a reset. For many, it was a sense of liberation, away from just functioning and being on autopilot to having that time to reflect and without any distractions or obligations to go out or, just do things that then later on you can show on social media. It was basically just you and your closest people, and that was very, very helpful. Even though for many it was also hard. I don't want to diminish also the pain that many people went through, but there is certainly also an opportunity to not have anything but yourself to really focus on. And I think that was the reason for this, great resignation, as they call it, where so much of the workforce has made shifts and changes. Unfortunately, I feel there is already a trend to ignore it and go back to how it used to be. And there's a lot of call to, thank God we can just go back to what was before the epidemic, the way of being. And that's unfortunately because I think we are missing out. We are missing out on the greater message, the greater opportunity that, you could say nature gave us in that moment. We haven't really come totally to our senses yet, but I'm not giving up.
I almost look at it, the pandemic, as a time where it says you have nowhere to run. You have absolutely nowhere to run. You're given, for some people, it's a 10 by 10 room and you have nowhere to go. So it's almost as if it imposed this isolation to be able to say, you're going to do your own therapy. you're going to start to figure this out. You don't need someone else or something else to be able to prompt you or fix your hole that's inside of you. So what it did is really ripped open a lot of doors for a lot of people. And it says, now you figure it out. And now people are saying, I don't know what I am figuring out. I don't know how to figure it out. And I don't know what it's supposed to even look like. Don't you think that's what your book is about, too?
Well, exactly, because I think we don't really know, what is really trying to communicate with us from the inside, nor do we really know how to communicate back. And so that is a lot what the book is about, learning, you call it the bridge, learning to find the bridge back to yourself, whether it's back to these root skills and resources such as self-compassion and all the way to self-love, or finding your bridge back to your essence, to your authentic truth, finding your bridge back to being the creator of your reality by able to looking at the past more as someone who is studying yourself rather than feeling trapped in whatever was done to you. I mean, there are many ways to really learn to understand yourself better. But, the focus in my book is very much to learn to consciously collaborate, communicate, be in a harmonious relationship with your subconscious mind, because it's the subconscious that knows so much more about us and our truth, our desires, our needs than the conscious mind. The conscious mind is a big computer, well, not that big, that got programmed and needs to often be unprogrammed. The subconscious is more like, okay, I'm here for you, but you have to be willing to listen. And that is where the meditation, introspection, journaling, all these nice little tools that are available to us, all those things can help us to be more in that collaborative relationship. And I think that's a very, very empowering relationship if we use it.
So, Dr. Friedemann, we're going to go on a little adventure here. So the way I have been sharing it is that we have a soul and a spirit, that's our inside self, and we have our human existence, which is the human body in which we jumped into. So if you look at it, what you were talking about is the conscious and the subconscious mind. Perhaps the conscious mind is the human wetsuit that's kind of like buffering everything in the world. All of these little badges on it are your experiences, your hits, your excursions, the good, bad, and the ugly that you kind of like go into in the world, and they're attached on the outside. And on the inside is your subconscious mind, which could be your soul and your spirit of an eternal self. And if that is true, then the eternal self has a lot of fragments. It has a lot of times that we say, oh, I picked up a story from my father from the past, and there's little pieces in there because that's an old lineage that I'm just reading. Or perhaps we say, why am I angry? I have no idea. Go within and find out. Sometimes you will find an old story, and it doesn't even relate to the present. That's some of your soul and your spirit from lifetimes before. So in essence, is not, when you're saying loss of power, I wrote in your survival mode loop, I wrote losing old energy, repeat fragments. So is not your subconscious mind perhaps bringing up these fragments that are spinning around in the ether, so to speak, that may be attached to you from either your ancestral lineage or your soul lineage, and they're coming forth. So you truly are looking inside instead of looking outside. Perhaps that's a lot to digest.
Well, it's not exactly how I see it, but it's certainly a very intriguing perspective. I do believe that the conscious mind is more than just a part of the human wetsuit. I do see the conscious mind as that what is ultimately given to us as free will, and that with that conscious free will, we can make this life either the growth and the mission and the purpose and this discovery journey of self that we are meant to be or meant to be on, or we can just totally waste everything and go into the opposite and also make that choice. And we have the free will to even take our lives or take other people's lives, and we can override the calling of our soul, that yearning of our goodness. The free will is very powerful, and I think it's not something that needs to be dismissed. But the free will, unfortunately, is also a little rudderless. It needs more from the inside guidance and support in order to be on the right path, and not just getting external commands or distractions. And the subconscious is the intercessor. I see the subconscious more like the mediator that goes between the soul and the conscious minds back and forth, and basically shows, okay, anxiety can be, you're so off your track, you're so out of alignment with your truth, and that's why you're anxious, because it forces you back to look at yourself. And it can be also, the subconscious giving you information through dreams or spontaneous awakenings or past life rememberings, that there are pieces that need to still be resolved or understood, or confusions that need to be, worked through, that are necessary on a soul's evolutionary purpose to be addressed and fulfilled. So, I mean, at least that's how I see. It's more like a trifecta working together. And the body, I mean, yes, wetsuit, but I love my body as a horse that I'm riding on this journey through. And it's one of the most, supportive aspects for this journey. And I just feel we have to be kind to our body, because it does such a good job to allow us to be even here and to move through this life.
Yeah. Can we talk about the word victim for a minute? So many times people will say, man, that just triggers the bejesus out of me. And if you honestly say it to a group of 100 people, I would think that if you ask them in silence and to be anonymous, to write down if it triggers you, you'll probably get a good 90% or more, because it may trigger them in their conscious or subconscious mind. So let's talk about the word victim. I like to look at it as the octopus. In other words, the head is your being, your human being, and you take your tentacles and you put them all out there, and that's what feeds you. You're just all hanging out, and everything is outside of you. It feeds you. It's how you exist. It's what supports you. It's what keeps you in this earth. It's about your existence and survival. It's your tribe that without it, you would say, oh my gosh, I can't exist. And we see this a lot with different generations. They say, what am I going to do when a loved one isn't here anymore? What am I going to do when I don't have a house anymore? What am I going to do when I don't have my eyesight anymore? And those are all things that people will say. They're living from that outside stuff again. And that word is such a trigger. What are your thoughts on that? Because you do write a lot about it.
Well, I think being in a victim mode is, something that I think a lot of people consciously or subconsciously exist in, whether it's just the survivor of abuse, or whether it's being the victim of the circumstances or the victim of the body and its disabilities. I mean, we can definitely feel like if things are not exactly the way we want them to be, that something is against us, or somehow we are, the ones that pull the short end of the stick. But in the end, I think also it does disempower us, because it is making that what happened to us, especially, when it happened in the past, as the determinant of what's going to happen in the future and who we are. And so we can hide in that mode, and we can simply either give up in this mode or find excuses. A lot of the people that I'm working with that come to me with a victim consciousness, also are, almost like defending it and becoming almost angry and putting you into this, you are the perpetrator because you don't accept that I'm the victim, and that's re-victimization. So I think we have to discern between being victimized, and that is certainly something that I think is important to see. There are times when we are the victims of someone who hurts us or, again, mistreats us, abuses us, and so on, but you don't have to live as the victim. So there is for us also to de-identify from that what happened to us, from that perpetrator, and realize that we are more than that, and that there is an opportunity for us to realize whatever happened to us is not our truth. What we do with it, whether we are learning to shed that pain, whether they're learning to forgive them, to forgive ourselves, whether they're learning to realize that our goodness is greater than the pain that they caused us, because we are not reacting to that pain by causing other people pain, because now it's normal to cause each other pain. There's so many ways to look at yourself and realize, I always was stronger, more courageous, more focused on light, love, and goodness than that what happened to me, and therefore I was already outgrowing it. It doesn't define me. It sharpened me. It made me more motivated to go on the right path than getting lost in that hole of victimization. But that's, I call it self-responsibility. That is up to us to choose how do we want to look into the past.
But also, too, we don't want to be afraid of experiences, because we could have an experience that will, quote, maybe look like I could be a victim. However, the answer is we could go and accept the experience. It's just that when I look at the word victim, I say, ooh, you've just been sitting in there a little bit too long, kind of idea, So in other words, everybody has experiences. It's just how you look at it at the end of the road once you close the door in reflection. And do you want to still keep carrying the house behind you, so to speak, or can you say, thank you for the experience, honor it, and move on, perhaps?
Yeah, I do believe that there is the phase in between, especially when this is an experience that we didn't choose, but that just happened to us, or again, we were hurt, that we want to have the self-compassion, that we want to honor the wounds, that we want to honor the part of us that did have to go through something difficult or maybe even horrific or a terrible loss. And then from that self-compassion, almost like gently taking this part of us by its hand and saying, I hear you, I see you, but you can also see there is more for us to learn and garner by going forward than staying stuck and looking back. And that is where, it takes time. Some people are the perpetrators to themselves, where they are, basically victimizing themselves all the time by telling themselves, well, I am, just not a strong human being because I struggle with anxiety, or I am, ugly, or I am not smart. And that takes also compassion to realize what you're doing to yourself. And it takes forgiveness to realize that you have been hurting yourself over the years. And if you have compassion and forgiveness, then you can also then say, okay, now it's time to take responsibility and outgrow this.
Right, and then once you do that, once you're doing that, is what you are really doing is letting go of some of the badges, letting go of some of the identities that you've been holding on to. I think about it, sometimes people will say, I have a disease or something's wrong, right? And then they have a cure, so to speak, and then they turn around and call themselves a survivor. What that's really doing is saying you're still attached to the disease as your identity. And in essence, if we just said, I passed through that phase, it was terrible, it was rough, it was awesome, it was moving, it was changing, it was life evolving. and then, again, do the same thing, thanking it and releasing it, you don't hold on to the idea of it. Sometimes people will say, I had a cure, I was fine, I was in remission, blah, blah, I was a survivor, and then they, quote, get it again. And we're going, okay, you've been holding on to it, you never kind of let it go to fly free. Perhaps?
Yeah, I think so. I totally agree. I mean, the fact is that being a survivor is something that we can be, proud of, but it doesn't have to define us. It doesn't have to be our reason to be. It doesn't have to be our identity. It can be an aspect, but it doesn't have to always be, like you said, dragged behind you. It can also be something that gives you encouragement and a sense of, potential and possibility that you have such an amazing healing power inside of you. And let's see how else we can utilize this power to bring greater joy, to, be more at peace, whatever those things are. It doesn't have to be always associated to an illness. I very much, or to any kind of event that was hard. I agree with that.
I've had such a horrific kind of life. I've been in all kinds of adventures. And I was sharing my story one time to someone recently, I think it was a few years ago. And she said, I'm so sorry for all of your suffering. And I had to look up Google, and I said, what is suffering? What does that mean? Because I never felt it. I was never attached to it. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And because of they were experiences, period. That was it. That's what it was. And I could never understand what the word was. And I look at it, and, sometimes we say, what is that you went through? And it is awesome. Patients would come to me, and they'd say, I have this disease, and I need to be able to find something because no one can help me. And I'll say, awesome, I'm so glad you have that disease. And they look at you with their eyes bugged out of their head, and they get angry and all this other stuff. I said, because it brought you here today to open a different way. Isn't that what we're asking people? How hard can the door be to bring you to the window? Isn't that what we want?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. I find sometimes that there were signs before that we don't really pay attention to. And, I always think it's a sequence of, first it starts with how we think, and then, whatever we need to pay attention to is showing up in feelings and in our actions, and then eventually goes transferred into our physical form because we're not paying attention. And that is something that I find often also the deeper meaning of illness is, that there is something that was trying to make us either wake up or make a course correction, and we can, again, free will, a conscious decision, stubbornly ignore it. And I think that is something that definitely, is a healing opportunity. And I always encourage people just to be aware of the inner signals. All aspects of us are continuously communicating with us through physical, but also through emotional and through dreams and in other ways, and we just need to tune into this radio station. We cannot always ignore it.
Also, too, Dr. Friedemann, I think we need to give people a free pass a couple of times because they've not really been taught how to listen to their body. They've not been taught to listen to their soul. They've not been taught to listen to their mind. If you look back on the decades and the generations, I mean, boy, when antibiotics came out, it was, I'm going to run to the doctor. He's going to fix and save me. I'm going to go to the psychiatrist, He knows how to do things. I talk to him. He gives me a prescription. I'm good to go. You go to your priest. Hey, I go in and tell him what I did. I get penance, and I'm kind of wiped clean. So in essence, humans have been taught that there's always a safety system. Do whatever you want in your life. Go get your safety system when you hit the door. But now we're in a space where the safety systems aren't there anymore. They can't save you. Look at the pandemic. They couldn't save us. Look at psychology and psychiatry. They can't save you. Look at the chaos in the world. What's going on? You look at the churches.
Right.
I live in New Orleans. There used to be a church on every single block, and I can't tell you how 75% of them are now gone. So the world is changing, shifting, and evolving. The difference is, are we asking people to step into awareness and open up your eyes? Even if you don't understand all the words you and I are saying today, open up your eyes and start reporting what you're seeing. Isn't that what we want as a first step?
Absolutely. And I do also find that, there is nothing new to the fact that these external sources cannot really, they can make us feel maybe more comfortable, but they cannot save us, and they never could.
Right.
So we always were forced to face ourselves. And so the anxiety is nothing new. Feeling depressed is nothing new. Feeling without purpose is nothing new. Maybe now there is a greater awareness because more people are talking about it. But, I was talking in the book about my dad who was anxious and depressed most of his life, and that was nothing new. That was something that definitely came from his trauma, many traumas that he had to go through in his life. And he could have reached out and looked for answers or be more kind and more brave to say, I do have a problem. I am someone who has all these emotional roller coasters that I suffer from and my family suffers with me, but he didn't. And so there is something also that I feel, we can give ourselves somewhat a free pass, but we also have to realize, the suffering is something that just continues to knock us over the head, because that hasn't changed probably since thousands of years. Just like, getting an upset stomach if you eat something bad hasn't really changed for, thousands of years, even though now we can override it a little bit with Tums and whatever. But in the end, our body tells us what's good for us. Our mind tells us what's good for us. Our soul tells us whether we are on track or not. It's a tuning in that's harder and harder. In the past, we were sitting much more in a void of stimulation. There were 3 or 2 TV programs, and that was it. 11 o'clock, it was quiet. There was so much more, quote-unquote, boredom. There was so much more space, and I think that is what we have to reclaim. And we have to be willing to also sit for longer than 3 minutes and pay attention, even if it's not getting us immediate results. All this instant gratification and all this short attention span, that is one of the greatest difficulties to really even come to the bridge, because the bridge is not popping up and you just waltz over. The bridge is something that often actually needs to be discovered or built, and that takes time.
Right. Sure does. Dr. Friedemann, I can also remember when meditation first started, to see it more in the public eye. And there would be signs all over about guided meditation. And I went into this one store and I was talking to her about it, and she was telling me all about what she does and everything for the session. And I walked out and I said, I'm just going to let that go. Nobody's guiding me anywhere. You know what I mean? I wasn't going to go on their path. because I was on my own unique path. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So sometimes we have to find tools that will bring us out of our space, but then we have to be willing to let them go. You don't need guided meditation. You can have your own meditation. Then you don't need to sit in meditation. You can just have a moment of connection. Then you start hearing and sensing and knowing what you should be doing. So that's how a path unfolds, don't you think?
I agree with that. But again, it's really the beginning sometimes is hard, sitting with yourself when you feel like you're more a stranger and maybe even an enemy to yourself than someone you want to get close to. So that's where guided meditation can help you to open yourself up and get some comfort or get some, basic tools to relax and eventually pay attention to yourself without feeling this oh my God, it's still and my mind is racing and I want to just run away from myself.
Yeah.
So these are all stepping stones, and we have to find those stepping stones that work for us, and we just have to look for them. It's the most rewarding aspects about life, to go on this discovery, treasure hunt journey of self. I think that's what life is really about. And every time I did it, I discovered that, wow, this is really gratifying. And sometimes it's scary and sometimes you are surprised, but in the end, getting closer and closer to yourself, which I don't know will ever end because there's always more to discover, I have a feeling that's really what we are here for.
What about the idea that you share in your book about a new safe world? You know, people are saying the world is not safe. People have known that the world is not safe. People have gotten broken. They've been really chewed up and spit out, and they said the world is not safe. So how do we say that the world is safe and that we're still existing in a world that is really on a chaotic loop right now?
Well, I think the world is safe. We are not safe. I mean, it's us humans that make it unsafe. I mean, now when you think about that, even you're walking up to a door and then you get shot just because you got, the wrong door. I mean, that's certainly not safe. But it all is connected to the fear. It's a fear of each other, the fear of the unknown, the fear that makes us defend ourselves. And so the safe world is being able to transcend this fear and realize that we are here ultimately to support each other, here to connect, here to have compassion and open our hearts, even if there is a risk that not everyone will, reciprocate in kind, or that even some may take advantage of us or hurt us. But I think the responsibility is for us to see each other as fellow travelers on this journey and not as competitors or enemies. And that needs to change.
Right, because you also talk in your book about watch out for the fork in the road. Sometimes people will go left or right, but I'll say sometimes people are just straddling that fork. They've got one foot in each side of the road. And that's when the real trouble begins, don't you think?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I always call it that, sitting on the fence and getting a sore butt because you never get off. You're absolutely right. There is an importance about, choosing sides. And I remember I grew up Lutheran, and in the town I grew up, for some reason, the Lutheran ministers, they were always the more hippie, outgoing, fun people. And one of them, talked about the fear of the unknown, the fear of others. And he said he rather takes a hitchhiker with him in the middle of the night in that hope that he can help someone out than letting the fear override that and basically, let someone stand there in the dark and in the rain, even if it's a risk, even if it could be that this person going to rob you. But going for that, what feels good and right to him, was more important than protecting himself. And that always, really rested with me. I thought that was a very courageous and very important way of going through life. Do the right thing, even though you don't really know if you will be rewarded for it or not.
Yeah, that definitely is the definition of conditional and unconditional living. Which do you choose? I live unconditional most of the time, but I think humans are pretty much predisposed to living a conditional life. We get it. If I cook a meal, it goes in my stomach. If I go buy groceries, it's going to show up. I need money to be able to do so. It's very much conditional. Let's talk also, too, Dr. Friedemann, about your chapter that says the helper pattern, overextended and underappreciated. And I wrote on the top, fix and fill, because fix and fill. They're looking for a fix. They would need to fill something inside of them. Many people live in a fix and fill kind of existence, don't you think?
Yeah, that was it's a very great way of describing this and summarizing it, because as a helper, and I certainly grew up as a helper and peacemaker in my family, there is something that on paper or on the surface looks very selfless. And you're a good person because you make others more important and you're always available. But underneath, you're absolutely right. It is about yourself. It can be very selfish to say, oh, I'm going to help others because I want their approval. I want their thank you. I want to feel important. And I'm going to help them even though I may actually prevent them from helping themselves or from going through what they need to go through in order for them to, become who they are meant to be or to learn and grow. And so there is something also self-serving about this helper pattern. And it's certainly also self-denying at the same place, because if you are not really filling your cup, you have nothing to give. And all that is left at some point is just bitterness and resentment, because you give and you hope to get that void inside of you filled. And at some point you realize people take you for granted because they just know this is who you are, and they don't really find it necessary to, give you a little pat on the back and tell you how important you are, because they just take you as you are that paper towel holder. You are there and you serve a purpose, but that's that. I don't say thank you to the paper towel holder every day. And I think that's where also this introspection of the pain that we are causing ourselves by holding on to the helper pattern without self-reflection, without any boundary, without any stewardship over our energy and over our time. We need to be aware of this pain in order to change.
If you look at it, that's where healthcare is at this precipice kind of point. I said probably at least 15 years ago that healthcare was going to implode, not explode, implode. It was going to fall upon itself. And if you look at it, it truly is in the beginning stages of that, where we hear, so many people in healthcare saying about burnout and everything, because they truly have that point where everyone around them is sort of like, it's almost as if the plug has been pulled out of the wall and it's flailing around and it hasn't figured out what's going to happen. I think that's where healthcare is right now. Don't you think perhaps it's a perfect example of that?
Well, that is one of the reasons why I left my career as a physician, because it did really implode internally for me by, on the one hand, giving me certainly, security and status and power, but on the other hand, it drained me, and it not only drained me from what I gave, but it drained me of my humanity. It drained me of my empathy. It disconnected me from that why I started, working in medicine in the first place, because I wanted to help people. But when you are in such in the hamster wheel and just, have to see so many people in a short amount of time, and all you can see is more a number or a diagnosis and not really the human behind it.
Right.
At some point, you are just feeling like, well, I'm becoming a robot. I'm no longer really someone who cares. I just want to get through the workload. And yes, that is. But, that is not only about the people in healthcare. This is also about how healthcare is unfortunately so much about numbers and profits and, getting a big turnaround. And there's just not enough time. And there's just not enough time for people to even share themselves with the doctor or the nurse. And there is not enough time for people to have, the attention that they deserve. And that is something where healthcare certainly has to go through some kind of an evolution, because, A, more and more people are leaving this field, and B, more and more people also feel like that they are not getting healthier. They're actually getting more ill when they go into the healthcare system.
But also, too, Dr. Friedemann, in my profession, naturopathic physician, we have the time. Sometimes your first appointment is 2-3 hours. However, I also left it, too, and stepped out into consulting because what I found is that people were coming in because they had maybe left from you guys and came over to our bank, so to speak. And what was truly happening is that they still were not responsible for self. They truly weren't. It was still that fix and fill mentality. And they just believed, oh, well, I'm going to do it now because it's natural. It's going to fix my problems. And it isn't the problem that's really bringing you in. It's something deeper. You've got to go down a rabbit hole. Sometimes if you look at it, and this is just stepping off of the edge for a minute, if you look at it like diabetes, why is it there? Well, why do you eat what you eat? Oh, well, my mother always made it this way. Okay, so your mother was giving you comforting food. It was sugar and milk all the time. Yeah, I even spoke to someone yesterday. He said, I used to open up condensed milk and eat it with a spoon. And I'm going, you're in your 60s and you're still doing this? Do you know what I mean? So the idea is where's the responsibility and how can we reverse that? So how we reverse it is what your book is talking about, is you look at yourself from the inside out instead of from the outside in. Your mother is no longer here. You now have a health condition. And condensed milk and sugar, because you did it when you're 6 years old, you don't need to do it when you're 66 if you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But I think that really brings us into our conscious and our subconscious mind again, and our free will, which we started this show about. What is your choice? Are you going to survive in which paradigm? Take a choice. Don't you think?
Yeah. I see this often with anxiety where there are just these really important processes and tools that help so much for us to connect to ourselves, to stay in alignment, to learn to have wider perspectives. And often people only do it because they are saying, well, this is going to fix my anxiety, and they don't see it as this actually helps me to grow and become, a more expanded version of myself. So we have to change the focus for sure from, we have to get rid of problems and then we can just join everyone else on this marathon through life, and reclaim this awareness that life is not a race and life is not just a tribal place that we somehow have to participate in or be productive in. Life is very much our own experience, our own decision. Like you said at the beginning, we jumped into it, and there is a reason why, and that is really where then it becomes much more about, okay, I want to care for myself. I desire to be whole and in alignment with who I am. I want to grow out of these childhood patterns and be a much more self-actualized being. And I don't have to always look left and right and compare myself and what do they do and why don't they have these problems and what's wrong with me. We are a huge distraction from ourselves because we are not really feeling so compelled to make ourselves important enough. And of course, I grew up with my parents telling me, don't feel too good about yourself. That's arrogant, and no one likes arrogance. So pay more attention to how other people are and how they want you to be, and put your own light a little bit, on low so that you're not outshining others. There's this constant need to fit in versus just be your truth. And that is certainly also hindering us to take ourselves more serious.
Yeah, I grew up with a lot of words. I won't repeat most of them, but the one I do remember is, who do you think you are? Just who do you think you are?
Oh, yes, good one.
Yeah, and I get that quite often. Quite honestly, I will still tell you, I still get it, and people will say, you're always high and mighty. You think you're up on a pedestal, and I'm going, oh. And sometimes you want to recoil when you hear that. And it's like, ooh, do I need to step down? What did I say or do? But you have to be able to be saying, I am who I am. Mm-hmm. And if you can just use that little sentence, I am who I am, I'm in alignment, and I'm doing this with goodness and compassion. If you can just write that down on a card, and when people say that to you, just take that card out and say that, and feel it in your heart and your soul, you will know after a while that you are totally okay. And that's what people want to know is, am I going to be okay on this journey? Perhaps.
Well, I'm not sure what okay even means. We definitely will not get out of alive, so no. And yes, if okay means that you actually reclaimed your freedom to be who you are, then yes, you're going to be okay. I mean, okayness is just the biggest trap, because that's the same thing. Oh, I feel uncomfortable with this question, or I feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Get over yourself. This whole comfort trap, let's not just go for comfort. Just not for comfort food, not just for comfort existence. I know that sounds maybe a little harsh, but I just don't feel that comfort is really making us grow. I never saw anyone grow in their comfort zone. It doesn't have to explode, the comfort zone. You have to put yourself out there and get scared, but you can always say that the comfort zone is to be expanded and to be challenged. Otherwise, we just go into this sleeping state. And my biggest concern is, and maybe that's a whole off topic, but because we are so into comfort, we are also more and more into self-medication. And there are more and more people that are just looking for alcohol and drugs and weed because it makes them more comfortable. And at the end, they only get more lost. And at the end, they become only more confused about who they really are. And so there's just something we have to be okay with being uncomfortable, not be afraid of it, but really saying, okay, why am I feeling this way? And what's the opportunity here? And what can I do with this discomfort that actually makes me realize I can grow from this?
Right. I think, Dr. Friedemann, if we look at it, people are so very afraid, and that fear has just been compounded over the decades. In closing, I had written this morning when I got up. I wrote, once you completely clear and heal the past, you can drop the oars and find your wings. The river of limitations becomes the ocean of potential. And I think that's so vitally important. Yeah, I think it's so vitally important because when we think about rivers, they go where they're supposed to go. They always stay within their banks. They know their place, so to speak. But when you think about oceans, they just are always free-flowing. There's just so much more of them to check out.
Yeah, that's a beautiful image.
Yeah, and sometimes people will say, they always say it to me, they say, oh, you need to go out and hug a tree, you need to get grounded to the earth. I said, honey, no way. I'm a person that always flies with my wings. I'm quite happy where I am. The earth is finding its own wings. Let me know when it finds it. And they just stand back and they go, whatever. And I just go, whatever. And I fly off, So I think sometimes when we use the word okay is like, oh, I'm okay. I'm okay if I'd like to fly today. I'm okay if that's where you want to go and hug a tree. I'm okay if I'm in disease today. I am still the I am. My spirit and my heart is still working. And I think in closing that we could just say we are all okay no matter what we're going through. It's just, if you're breathing, you're still here, right?
Yeah, that's so true. And I also want to really encourage everyone to get whatever, they get from this conversation, not as a way to feel discouraged, but really inspired to know that whatever is inside of us, there is a reason for it to be, and it's really a calling to get closer to yourself. Just don't allow yourself to be, told that you have to be afraid. Don't look at the news or the media that makes you feel like that everyone is out to get you. Just really shut it off. Go inside, connect to yourself, connect to your goodness, connect to your soul, and just listen. Because you are whole. Whether you're struggling with physical or emotional issues, you are whole. You are sacred. And it's remembering of the sacredness that this journey is about. And no one should distract you from that. And so spend some time in just rejoicing in your truth and then see what's next.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Friedemann, can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
Yeah, you can find my new book, The Empowerment Solution, on Amazon or anywhere where there are books sold. You can find me at dr-friedemann.com. It's dr-friedemann.com. And I do private sessions. I have also an upcoming From Anxiety to Empowerment class that will start in May. And there are many free resources and many ways just to follow me on social media or on YouTube and get hopefully some inspiring information on how you can live in a more empowered and fulfilling way.
Very good. Well, Dr. Friedemann, it was such a pleasure to have you with us here to dance in the ethers, so to speak, today, and we just absolutely loved having you. And perhaps you'll come on again in another time, and we'll continue this conversation, but we thank you so much for today.
Thank you very much, and I would love to come back for sure.
Awesome. Well, if you'd like to find out more information about Dr. Friedemann-Schaub, again, his book is The Empowerment Solution, 6 Keys to Unlocking Your Full Potential with the Subconscious Mind. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to his website for more information. And it is about stepping out and saying, something's up. I don't know. I want to do something different. I want to let go of these chains that are holding me back. Or perhaps you're saying, I've been kind of floating around in the abyss and I need a little guidance. Reach out to either Dr. Schaub and we both have sessions to be able to help guide you. We thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr-jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.